Four. My guest today is the former world chess champion Garry Kasparov. He's been called the greatest chess player of all time. But since retiring from professional chess in 2005, Kasparov has been making headlines as a human rights activist and, perhaps more significantly, a fierce opponent of Russia's President Vladimir Putin. Now, his recent book, Winter is Coming: Why Vladimir Putin and the Enemies of the Free World Must Be Stopped, is really a blunt warning to the West to stop appeasing a man that Kasparov sees as the perhaps greatest enemy of the free world. He joins me today from New York. Welcome, where you are now living, traveling a lot, but living full time. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for inviting me.
Garry Kasparov, you are, like I said in that intro, master tactician, perhaps the greatest chess player who ever lived. You've said before, Vladimir Putin's not a chess player at all. He's a poker player. Is that why he sort of is able to catch, it seems, everyone off guard? He always seems to be one step ahead.
Yes, he doesn't play chess, and I don't believe dictators like the game of chess because the game of chess is 100% transparent. And dictators, they prefer clandestine games where they can blackmail, they can scare off opponents, and they can bluff. Even having a weak hand, he can raise the stakes, as Putin did many times, and he could sense that his opponents would fold the cards.
But my question to you is this. As a chess player, you yourself, I mean, part of what you had to do is anticipate your opponent's moves, sometimes many moves ahead. How are you able to sort of, predict how Vladimir Putin is going to behave if he is a poker player, if he keeps his cards close to his chest, if he hides so much?
Now, part of playing chess, I read a few history books, and I know that all dictators, they have similar behavior. Okay, there could be different historical, geographical circumstances, but at the end of the day, every dictator, after eliminating all the enemies inside of his own country, he will look for enemies outside. And I just simply followed what Putin said and what Putin did, and it was very clear that Putin would make eventually, as he did, confrontation with the free world as a core of his domestic propaganda. While the Russian economy is going down, Putin has no other chance but to present himself as the savior of Mother Russia, fighting against the global evil. So that's why confrontation it is now and will remain Putin's main kind of philosophy of staying in power.
And as you know, Garry, it's a big part of Putin's narrative has been that the West has been bent on humiliating Russia, great mother Russia, bringing it down to its knees. Isn't it true, though? Okay, you blame the West for appeasement, but haven't the Russians themselves, they've bought into that narrative? The Russians have also supported Putin to a great extent.
Look, again, every dictator enjoys massive support until he is overthrown. So that's why I wouldn't give much credit to the so-called public polls run by the institutes in a non-democratic country. But regarding this myth of Russian humiliation, expansion of NATO, eastward expansion of NATO, unfortunately, this West has been promoted by many Putin's lobbyists in the free world as well. But it's a myth because at the end of the day, when you look at the balance of military powers in Europe, by the end of 2013, there was not a single American tank in Europe. So NATO was a purely defensive structure, and thanks God, that NATO expanded to the Baltics, because otherwise Putin's tanks would be rolling on the streets of Tallinn, Riga, and Vilnius.
Okay, so it's a myth, perhaps, then, that the West is bent on bringing down Russia, a myth perpetrated and perpetuated by Putin, in your view. What about what he's trying to do outside? We've been talking on this, incessantly about the Putin-Trump alliance, the so-called Donald Trump-Vladimir Putin alliance. Isn't Trump too unpredictable to predict that he'll be a member of any alliance with any leader, let alone Vladimir Putin?
No, definitely Trump is unpredictable, but the problem with Trump is that we don't know to what extent he was, I would say, in bed with Vladimir Putin, whether Trump had any financial ties. Actually, he did have financial ties with Russian oligarchs. At what extent? So how much money does Trump own to foreign powers, Russia, China, maybe others? And of course, what Trump said during the campaign and what he promised to do and what he's doing in the first few days of his presidency indicates that he's playing straight on the Putin's hands. Again, we don't have all the explanations, but there are too many coincidences. There are too many dots that can be tied in one, geopolitical construction that looks too favorable to Putin.
Do you think, though, just to put it bluntly to you, directly to you, do you think Vladimir Putin has compromising material that is yet to go public on Donald Trump?
Possible. Again, I don't have any proofs, but again, judging from the circumstantial evidence, there's definitely something that makes Trump, too friendly to Putin, which is, can be hardly explained. And it's not only Trump, but when you look at some of the people from his inner circle, they have very close ties to Russia. And again, it's unexplainable, when Donald Trump and his people have been denying reports of American intelligence and taking a word from a KGB officer.
This is interesting. To bring it across the ocean to where I am, I'm sitting here in Paris. Obviously, elections coming up here in France later this year, as well as in Germany. Lots of speculation here that what we just saw happen, or perhaps happen in the U.S., could be happening in Europe. Putin trying to interfere in the elections here. A, do you believe that that's going to happen? And if so, how's he going to do it?
Oh, absolutely. Putin actually found out that he can use the freedom of speech and the democratic institutions in the West to advance his agenda. For instance, he used very skillfully the flow of refugees from Syria, which of course he pushed, with his client Bashar al-Assad to Europe to support ultranationalist groups across the continent, which, of course, benefits him politically. When you look at the 2016 elections and referendum, Putin succeeded everywhere where he had an interest. The referendum in Holland, the referendum in Great Britain, Trump's elections in Bulgaria, elections in Moldova, and referendum in Italy. And now you could see it, how some of the Russian-controlled websites that were pro-Trump now shifting, for instance, to Germany to attack Angela Merkel. So naturally, his targets will be Holland, elections in Netherlands, France, Italy, and of course Germany. And French elections is, what is one of the big targets because up to now, Putin believed that he had two leading candidates, both of them very, very friendly to him.
And just to be clear here, François Fillon, who's one of the candidates for the Republican Party here, the conservative candidate, he's seen as very friendly to Putin.
Oh yeah, that's again. It's not just that he seems, what he says and what he promises to do if elected, it just simply plays it into Putin's hands. No matter what Putin says or Russian propaganda trumpets, economic situation in Russia is dire, and Putin badly needs to leave the sanctions. So that's why he's doing absolutely everything to propel his friends or his clients like Marine Le Pen into power to break up the blockade. And if he doesn't succeed in 2017, his political prospects in Russia could be quite unpredictable.
He has some help. You've spoken before about some of the tools. Russia Today, RT, the broadcaster, being, in your view, one of the big propaganda tools that he's using to push this agenda.
Absolutely. This is the best financed television station in the world. It already carries programs in several languages, and you can find it almost in every hotel in the free world. You also have Sputnik, and you have other Kremlin outlets, but also you have many friendly publications inside Europe, European countries, or the United States. Because Putin succeeded, we have to give them credit, to build one of the most sophisticated, probably the most sophisticated lobbying network of agents in the free world to promote his agenda.
Garry Kasparov, in the couple of minutes we have left, it's clear you're no fan of Vladimir Putin, fierce critic of him. What do you do if you want to drive him from power? How do you go after Vladimir Putin? What is his soft spot?
Look, I'm no friend of any dictator, whether he runs Russia or any other country. And I believe that these dictators now, they're fighting the free world because at a time, of global communication, they have no other choice but to continue this confrontational policy to justify their endless stay in power. So the softest spot for Vladimir Putin is actually geopolitics. We know from history that these dictatorships, like the Soviet dictatorships or others, they failed after being defeated geopolitically. For instance, the retreat from Afghanistan was a deadly blow to Soviet empire. So if Vladimir Putin fails to advance his geopolitical agenda, he'll become very vulnerable at home because he knows dictators can make many mistakes except one. If they look weak, they will be taken care of by their own inner circle.
Very briefly, we're just about out of time. You were a very close friend and collaborator with the slain opposition figure Boris Nemtsov. You're now living, as I said, full-time in New York. You're afraid to go back to Russia? Are you afraid for your own safety if you were to go back?
Look, my trip to Russia will be one-way ticket. It's not dangerous. It's stupid. And actually, I left Russia upon the advice of Boris Nemtsov. And it was tragic that Boris was so brave and so proud of being, a Russian opposition leader that he hasn't left Russia, and he was slain, as you said, by Putin's henchmen. And that's another proof, that this regime will not stop at anything to stay in power.
And I'll just leave with this thought here. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that Boris Nemtsov had told you at some point before, obviously, he was killed, that
absolutely.
You yourself should leave Russia.
Yeah, in 2013, for 4 years already, I live outside of Russia. And trust me, as the most decorated Russian and Soviet athlete, it was not my first choice.
I understand. Garry Kasparov, thank you so much for joining us today, sharing your thoughts on Putin, the Putin-Trump alliance, what's ahead for Europe. Author of the recent book, Winter is Coming, Why Vladimir Putin and the Enemies of the Free World Must Be Stopped. Garry Kasparov joining us from New York. And thanks to all of you for watching the interview on France 24.
Thank you.